a land acknowledgement as a reminder to all of us to reflect on the past, present, and future of this land. Coach House, where this book was produced, is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, and the Wendat, and is currently home to many diverse First Nations. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So before we get started too, I want to thank Tally Voron and James Lindsay for making this event happen. It's so great to be able to be here. With all of you tonight. It's a real bummer that we can't be in person to celebrate the launch of this amazing book, but at least if you're at home, you can be wearing fluffy slippers at a book launch, which is what I'm doing. Just so all of you know, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're interested in closed captioning, it is on the bottom of the Zoom bar. You can turn that on if you want a sort of live text version of what's going on. If you want to say something to Andrew or to other people in the crowd or to the panel, to me, you can type it in the chat. And if you have any questions, we're going to be doing a little Q&A with Andrew at the end. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A, which is also on the bottom of the Zoom bar. And we're happy to address those questions after we're done the reading portion of the evening. So without much further ado, I want to introduce this book, The Crash Palace, which I hope that some of you have read. And if you haven't read it yet, you'll read it soon, I hope. It's an amazing story of Audrey, who is maybe a character unlike any you'll ever encounter in fiction. I think we're all a little bit in love with Audrey. And to read from The Crash Palace and to introduce our other entertainment for the evening, I'd like to introduce Mr. Andrew Wedderburn, who is the author also of The Milk Chicken Bomb. And here we are a few short years later with The Crash Palace. Andrew, take it away.
Thanks so much, Alana. Yeah, a few short years, here we are doing it again. Thank you. Hi there, everybody. I'm so excited that you're all here. Excuse me. Like Alana said, I wish that we were all together someplace and could see each other, but I'm just delighted to see you all in the list here and really exciting to be reading from this story to you. Before I get going here, I'm gonna read a section from the novel with a brief introduction. My dear friend and brother Matt Swan is going to play some songs. I'll read, Matt will play. Before any of that, I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, where I am, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, the Pigunni, and the Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So yeah, let me read you from this story. The first part that I'm going to read takes place when Audrey is 20 years old, and she has been working recently in the oil sands just outside of Fort McMurray as a crew driver, which is the person that takes the riggers back and forth to the work site. Except she isn't anymore because she quit and ran away. And immediately before this scene, she was hitchhiking and is picked up just outside of Fort Saskatchewan by a van, an old van full of some men who introduced themselves as the legendary Lever Men. And their names are Rodley Leverman, Wrists McClung, Richard Dick Move, and Hector Highwater. And Audrey is now in a bar on Jasper Avenue in Edmonton, where these men, who are in fact a rock and roll group, have unloaded their gear onto the stage. So this is Rodney Leverman. He plugged the guitar in and flipped off the standby, waiting while the lights on the front of the head lit up red. He stood up, twisted the microphone in its stand, and sucked in his cheeks. Check, check. And forgive us our trespasses. Check. 1, 2. As we forgive those. 1. Yeah. Trespass. Daily bread. We're ready when you are. The bar was quiet. "I guess we're ready anytime, sure," said the sound man at the back of the room. And then, instead of whatever she'd expected, they played reverb-heavy tremolo-armed surf chords and space echo arpeggios, exactly something that her father would have had on a cassette, that eyes closed she'd have known in time with 55 minutes worth of Highway 1 landmarks, the Exshaw cement plant, the Kananaskis Park off-ramp, the all-alone lights of the all-by-themselves reservation houses out on the Morley Flats, the trucker weigh-in station, and in a few minutes, the Cochrane Overpass, Petro-Canada, and then it's just down one hill and up another into the city limits. None of them sang or spoke into the microphones. They just played fuzzy, echoing surf rock riffs and vibrato country chords for an hour and a half, by the end of which Audrey was alone in the bar with the band and the staff. She sipped her ginger ale and closed her eyes and let the music pour over and into her. Afterwards, Rodney slumped in the booth, panting, sweat on his lined face and in the clipper-length bristles of his scalp. His washing machine thin shirt stuck translucently to his pigeon chest. Dick Move came back to the table with 2 closed hands full of beer necks, a shot glass of bourbon clasped and spilling between his 2 upright thumbs. "Domestic bottles is all they'd give me without paying," he said. He stood, trying to solve the problem of how to let go of the beer bottles without probably dropping the bourbon. No one at the table made any move to help him out. Hector came back from the bar with a bottle of beer and 2 glasses of whiskey. He put one of the glasses in front of Rodney. "What's the plan tomorrow?" asked Hector. "Tomorrow? You mean tonight? We have to play in Nanaimo tomorrow." "So we'll drive to Nanaimo tomorrow." Hector drank a shot of whiskey and tilted back his beer. "We have to be there at 7, said Dick Move. "It's what, 10 hours? He put the beer bottoms flat on the tabletop and focused hard on his fingers, working on which ones needed to release the bottlenecks and which needed to stay tight around the shot glass. "When I was in the plunging necklines, we used to play in a bar in Nanaimo called the Log Driver. Is that still there?" "It's 10 hours from Calgary to Vancouver, and we're in Edmonton. There's the ferry to Nanaimo. That's 2 hours on its own. We have to drive tonight." "Wrists has to drive tonight, you mean," said Hector. "I'm drinking." Wrists came back to the table with 2 hands full of beer bottles. "Don't get too comfortable," he said. "We have to drive tonight. Load in for Nanaimo is 7 o'clock. We have to take the ferry." "You have to drive to Nanaimo. We're drinking," said Dick Move. "I'm not driving. I'm drinking. Hector's driving." They sat around the table looking at each other. I guess I could sober up a bit after I finish these," said Hector. Wrists sighed, twisted in his seat, rummaged in the jean jacket hung over the back of his chair. I write all this down for you doughheads. Don't you read the printouts?" He pulled out a padded manila envelope, heavily creased. From this, he produced a folded piece of paper, the printer sprocket reel still attached to either side. "Day 4, Saskatoon to Edmonton, Trap and Grizzly, Jasper Avenue. Load in 6 o'clock, set time 10 o'clock, 90 minutes. He jabbed a finger on the sheet and read slowly, exaggerating every syllable. "Leave early, drive overnight to make day 5 Nanaimo load in at 7 o'clock p.m. Hector and Dick both took long pulls at their beer bottles. "What if we got up like really early?" asked Dick. "It's 8 hours just to Kamloops from here. 3 more past that to Vancouver, then however much time you wait at the ferry terminal. Even if we left at 6, we might not make it." "If we're getting up at 6, we might as well drive tonight." "I'm not driving anywhere tonight. I'm going to be too drunk to drive anywhere in about 10 minutes. "I'm not going to Edmonton," said Audrey Cole. The men all looked at her. "I wasn't going to Edmonton." "Where are you going?" asked Rodney. "It doesn't much matter," she said. She pushed her ginger ale glass into the middle of the table. They looked at each other and Rodney grinned. He took the shot glass from between Dick's thumbs and drank it. "Hey," said Dick, "that was..." "What time do you want to get going?" Rodney asked. Once you're finished with all those, said Audrey, we'll have time. Hold on, said Wrists. Hector clanked his bottle against one of Dick's and drained it down. Pass me another one of those, he said. Hold on, said Wrists. We're not taking on a teen runaway. I'm not a teenager. I'm 20. You look like a teenager. You look like a grandfather, said Audrey, and Dick and Hector both laughed. We're not popular, said Wrists. We're not popular, and we don't draw, and there isn't going to be any money. We're not giving you any money. I've got money, said Audrey. Tomorrow at this time, you're going to be 1,000 kilometers away in some other shithole that looks more or less like this one. And whether or not you're going to Edmonton, you're not going to be any place in particular. And that'll be just perfect, said Audrey. No place in particular. Jesus, Wrists, now you're talking me out of going, said Rodney. Just drink up. Drink up and give me the keys, said Audrey Cole. I'll turn it over now to, so really excited. Astral Swans, Matt Swan is a fantastic singer-songwriter musician who I had the privilege of being in a group that used to travel around to places like that to play to nobody with. He's become much more successful since leaving us behind. I'm really delighted to introduce Astral Swans, who's going to play a song. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Astral Swans. I'm hugely honored to be here for Andrew Wedderburn's book launch for The Crash Palace. Andrew and I played in Hot Little Rocket together a number of years ago, and I love him like a friend and a brother, and I feel grateful to have had the opportunity to collaborate and tour and spend all sorts of time with this special human being. This song is about a suburban dad that falls off a cruise ship while on vacation and thinks that he's dying. It's brand new. As my body gets swept to the shore, I looked down and said, I don't need you anymore. Don't need you anymore. My wife and my kids, my job, my mortgage, I don't need them anymore. Don't need them anymore. Fake smiles can't be forever. Fake smiles can't be forever. My dad, my affair, the teachings of my parents, I don't need them anymore. Don't need them anymore. This life sometimes bleak was just forced on me. I don't need it anymore. Don't need it anymore. Anymore. Fake smiles can't be forever. 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 Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks so much. I want to applaud loudly and run up and yay. I'm going to read another section here. Thank you. Just this. The good thing is I practice Zoom all day long in my other life. So I can more or less figure out the muting and the unmuting. Okay, so years later, Audrey lives in Calgary, and she has become a mother. She has a young daughter named Shelley Cole, who's 3. And on this particular day, all day long, Shelley has been asking her mother to take her to see Glenn for magic. So now they've walked down to the end of the block. They live on 12th Avenue in Calgary, to the little grocery store at the end to see Glenn, who sits outside. Shelley stood patiently with her dinner plate wide eyes and hands clasped in front of her chest. Glenn shifted on his plastic folding chair, leaned down to root in the canvas bag he kept underneath, shuffling the papers inside. Shelley stood waiting while he puttered and rooted, and then he looked up. "Oh, hello, Miss Cole. When did you get here?" He had too few teeth, and they were in the wrong places, all under a broom bristle mustache, the whiskers of which looked to hurt the face they were so thickly rooted into. "Shelley," Audrey said, "go ahead." On weekday mornings after rush hour, Glenn Arpey would get off the number 2 bus outside the St. Anne apartments. He came into Mirko's grocery with his heavy backpack hitch-upped on 2 shoulders, and if Morris or Mirko had a customer, he waited, not talking to people inside the store by long-standing agreement. Once the shop was empty, he let himself into the back storage room where he kept his chair and his padded seat cushion. Outside, he unfolded the chair, opened up his backpack, and pulled out a stack of bond paper booklets with black and white Xeroxed covers. The Lunar Purview, Calgary's authentic newspaper of vigilance and true voice. "Every lie is a porthole into which the black waters of cold time lap and look and wait," Glenn Arpey would declaim at passers-by while cars slowed and stopped for the red light a block ahead. "And we can rivet that steel seal tightly as we might against the rime and bluster, but drip, drop, we can only float above our falsehoods for so long before the bottom goes out. Whereas the truth printed on a page will keep on your shelf high and dry, and your humble vendor's personal cost to produce is only 65 cents an issue." As long as Audrey had been coming to Mirko's, for a box of tea bags, for toothpaste or dental floss, a carton of milk, baby wipes, or after work on a Saturday afternoon for a cup of coffee, for a cup of the thick black coffee he kept slowly reducing on a burner behind the counter. Glenn had always been sitting outside, yelling at people, shaking his handmade newsletters at them. Glenn Glarpey, I want a magic," Shelley said in a small, cautious voice. He grinned to show her the black veins in his gums. Then he sighed dramatically. "Baby Shelley Cole, I am delighted by your enthusiasm. If more people wanted magic, it would be a good deal easier to perform and produce. Unfortunately, magic is not only difficult for the practitioner, but demanding on the audience. And the sort that I've made my practice requires of both participants the sort of keen, unclouded attention that is rigorously squeezed out of all of us like so much toothpaste by the circumstances of life." He waved his hand around to encompass the building, the street lights, traffic. "Their institutions do not grasp and pinch the tube willy-nilly. No, they roll from the bottom up, from the first day of kindergarten, so that years later, every smear of cognitive gumption has been pressed out and left to stick to the bottom of the sink. Shelley Cole, because you are as of yet completely untouched by this grist pincher, you're the ideal magician's audience. An increasing rarity, however, and this difficulty in securing an appreciative audience has more or less drummed not only the desire, but the ability itself from me of late." Shelley's eyes were big and her mouth open in anticipation. In this atmosphere of persuasive, smothering skepticism, I find it more or less impossible to practice any sort of interesting magic. For instance, he said, stretching and wiggling his fingers to show off the cracked nicotine yellow nails and thick white knuckle hairs, I'm unable to produce the most basic misdirections and conjurations. Then he snapped his fingers loudly and pointed at Shelley. The little girl followed the line from his finger to the plastic zipper of her puffy jacket, which she unzipped a few inches and then gasped. A rolled up tube of white printer paper protruded from inside her coat. She looked up at her mother and then at Arpy, who motioned for her to give him the paper. For instance, he said, I'm sure it would be altogether impossible these days for me to conjure up a little girl's favorite animal. I'd be unable to produce a... Shelley waited a moment, making sense of this, then said, kitty. Right, said Glenn, a kitten. It would be out of the question for me to make a kitten with magic. He patted the pockets of his pants and jacket, then squinted at her coat again and pointed at her pocket. She reached in, then made a happy little squeal and produced a black Sharpie marker, which she gave to him. A kitten, he said. Right. Just not possible. He uncapped the marker and drew on the paper, flat against his thigh. A few quick lines and marks, then held it up. A crude cartoon of a dog with floppy ears and a bushy tail. Shelley shook her head. No, she said. Kitty. Right, a kitten. This is what I mean, he said, drawing again. Proficiency in magic has more or less deserted me at this point. He held up a drawing of a pig with two little slots in its snout nose and a single squiggle curly tail. Not piggy, kitty. There was one sheet of paper left, and he scribbled furiously, then held up a duck with wide feet and an open bill and a speech balloon, which said, quack, quack. No, kitty, said Shelley. Glenarpy coughed and shrugged, then squinted his bushy eyebrows and pointed at Shelley's zipper again. She pulled it down further to produce another rolled up tube of paper. She unfolded it, then squealed with delight, turned to her mother and showed her a black marker drawing of a little kitten with whiskers, licking an upraised paw, its long tail curling happily behind it. No, magic is altogether too thankless an occupation these days, said Glenarpy. Shelley giggled and clapped. Mommy, it a magic kitty. It's a magic kitty, said Audrey. Can I keep magic kitty, Mommy? We'll put it on the fridge. What do you say? Shelley concentrated so that she could say as clearly as possible, thank you, Glarpy, for magic kitty. You're very, very welcome, said Glenn. Go in and show Mirko, said Audrey. Shelley pushed into the hot, bright store, and once she was inside, Audrey fished in her purse and found a $10 bill. Glenn inclined his head seriously and stuffed it in the inside pocket of his jacket. Here, he said, handing her a copy of the Lunar Purview. Take a paper. All right, we will hand it off to Astral Swans for another song.
Through the magic of video editing, I just switched this guitar. Now I'm playing this guitar. This song is called What Calms You Down Freaks Me Out. It's off my first record, which is called All My Favorite Singers Are Willie Nelson. Thank you so much. I'm Astral Swans. It's been an honor to be here playing these two songs for you. And best wishes, Andrew. Yeah, and congratulations. Happy holidays, everyone. Cheers.
I love that, man.
That was amazing. It was such a great pairing, and so good to hear both of you. So thanks to both of you for that. Really amazing. So I'm going to invite all of you to send any questions you might have for Andrew about the writing of this book or anything else you'd like to ask him about. I will lob some softball questions at him until you deliver the hard-hitting questions in the Q&A. So get ready, think up your questions, and I'm going to ask Andrew to talk a little bit about maybe how he knew how to write about dive bars and playing to empty floors.
I mean, I've touched on that. Yeah, I mean, I, I've been in rock and roll bands for 20 years, and we don't get out much these days. But there was a time when I was in Hot Little Rocket when we were back and forth across the country. You know, as far as Halifax, but and really frequently between kind of Winnipeg and Victoria, and through a lot of that Western Canadian. I saw Bob Summers from Winnipeg chimed in the chat. We would stay at Bob's place in Winnipeg, and you end up in these. It's all wonderful because you're playing music and you're doing what you love and you're with people that you love, but also in like very real terms, like you spend a lot of time driving into Kitchener, Ontario at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and sitting in the circus room for 2 hours before they open, kind of watching the staff disinfect the place. I don't know if the circus room in Kitchener, Ontario was still there. It was painted like a circus. And so, yeah, we did that. Aaron and Joelle and Mark and Patrick and Matt and myself. Matt, we went out, you know, we were in Hamilton and Peterborough, and we played in this strange place in Sault Ste. Marie. It's for every kind of like recognizable experience, there are 3 or 4 just completely like, how did I end up here? And how does this even work? Kind of.
You did an amazing job. I felt like I could smell the stale beer reading those scenes. So
Okay, good. That's, yeah, that there's a particular palette of smells to a bar before it opens.
it's not a good palette, but yeah.
No.
Well, and thank you especially for bringing that to us at a time when we can only remember the good things about cars. Another big part of the book is not just bars, but cars. So Audrey loves driving. She's obsessed with driving, will do anything to be in a car anytime. Is this something you share with her?
A lot of that is drawn. I mean, I grew up here. I live here again in Okotoks, but when I was a teenager, I had this old Dodge Ram that had been my dad's that he passed down to me. And I used to like, you go 15 minutes that way. I'm pointing west. And there's just this grid of roads, and you can get lost and turned around, and the landscape transforms depending on the route you take. And I just loved that feeling of driving without any particular direction in mind. And so that was kind of a route for it. And then years ago, we actually would have been on tour. We were in Toronto staying with our friends Aaron and Elizabeth Booth. And Aaron told us this, I can't remember how it came up, but he told us this story about when he was a teenager and he would buy and sell cars for under, like he had this knack for finding $50 cars. And when you're a writer, somebody tells you a story like that, you just kind of like file it away, like, oh, that just became mine. Sorry, I'm stealing that from you. And that was I think the first pages of Audrey that I ever wrote were kind of like about this teenage girl that bought and sold $50 cars and just drove them around, the area around Canmore. And it became, it touched on stuff that I had connection to, but also I was like, there's a lot about this character who knows who she is. I want to find out more about her. What does she care about? What does she want? What happens when she gets older? And that exploring those ideas became the writing of the novel.
Well, what's interesting about Audrey, and I think probably made her tough to write, is that she's very private. She's very aloof. She doesn't reveal a lot about herself. What's it like to write a character who doesn't spill everything out in the page, even when you're writing from her point of view?
I mean, yeah, and I wanted her to maintain a lot of that privacy, but also obviously the reader needs information to react to and draw from. So that was the balance and the challenge of the writing. Over the course of the novel, Audrey goes through these adventures, and then there's this kind of break in the story, and then we rejoin Audrey later. She now lives in Calgary. She does not drive anything anymore. She has a daughter. What happened in between? And hopefully I've done a good job kind of striking the balance of there should be things that the reader can figure out. But it was important to me to not state a lot of it explicitly, because I wanted to kind of, Audrey doesn't share. And that's part of her character. She is private and she keeps things to herself. So part of the kind of narrative positioning of her needed to be respecting that and kind of enabling the reader to experience that.
I know that's an unfair question because we worked on the book together, and
for people, like, there was years where I would give drafts to Alana and she would be like, no, I still don't know what's going on. You kind of got to go back to the drawing board a bit. But we worked through that.
we have a question from the audience, from Craig Boyko. What's the best blurb you could imagine receiving for this book?
Oh my God, Craig. Craig
and I to write it. So
Craig Boyko is a better writer than I am, so he would be more. We were in Aretha Van Herk's fiction writing class. And he is a prize-winning short story writer. The best blurb would be, oh my God.
It's a great question, by the way.
People used to ask me, what's it about? And I would say, well, it's about a single mother who runs away from her life for a night and then gets stuck. And kind of leave it to folks. I don't know if that's a good blurb, but that's a summary for it.
What's the adjective you would want someone to describe it? Now that we're done all the catalog copy and the back cover copy, now I'll ask you.
Now that it's all put on here. Oh my God. My writing brain is shut right off. It's cold. That's an adjective. And it does
take place in a blizzard.
There is a literal blizzard. And it's mysterious, but that's not the right one. And it's often through the windshield of a car, which isn't a single word or an adjective.
We have another question, so you can keep that one in the back of your mind. From Spencer, do your kids or coworkers inspire any characters in the book? Any notable character inspirations? And I'm going to add in parentheses that you're willing to admit to.
Spencer's a coworker of mine, so
I figured.
There's actually, because it's set in Calgary and it's about the music scene, and it's well, like music in Calgary, and there's kind of these familiar locations. Like she lives on 12th Avenue. So I was fairly cautious not to put anybody that I knew directly in. Although there are certain archetypes of people, like none of the Lever men are any of my own bandmates, and I'm fairly confident they won't see themselves in there, despite kind of going through some of the same things. There's the experience. Audrey's daughter Shelley is 3. And we had our daughter Hanako when I was still working on it. And so I was able to kind of go back and be like, aha, now I know what kids are like, and rewrite a lot of that, although being cautious. Not Shelley is not Hannah, but I learned a lot about kids from Hannah, and hopefully was able to write that fairly well.
So not copying to actually depicting any of your coworkers. That's a good move.
I don't think anybody's quite exactly in there, no.
Bob Summers asks, who plays Audrey in the miniseries or any of the other characters?
Oh my God, that's a whole
He says
thing.
he respects and assumes that there would never be a second season.
I don't know who would act it, but I would hire the Sadies to record the soundtrack, to kind of like stand in as the Lever men off stage. That would be my dream. And Laurie obviously would produce the whole thing. How's that, Bob? Is that an answer?
We have another question. Would you call this a Prairie Road novel, or is it more sort of pan-Canadian?
It's the prairies. It's kind of like it's the prairies and the interior of BC and the Eastern Rockies, and especially that magical place between the Eastern Rockies and where it turned before it's the prairies, like the foothills, where like when you're driving east, it's kind of becoming the prairie, and when you're driving west, it's becoming the mountains, and it's this really magical transitionary landscape that is completely different, literally depending on which direction you're angled in, and that kind of fed, I think, a lot of the kind of like ambiguity and sort of like transformative magical spaces. The landscape itself is magical.
And a question through the chat, whether Audrey is actually you.
Audrey, there's stuff that I drew on, but I was pretty deliberate to make Audrey herself and not me, for quite a lot of reasons. Some of my own experiences were sort of sparks and inspirations for some of the things that she's into, but Audrey very quickly became Audrey, and it was a joy to write because she took on this life of her own right from the get-go. And
have you ever accidentally stolen a car?
I've never accidentally stolen a car, no.
Mike Peterson is asking, what did you learn from writing this book that you didn't know before writing it?
I had to learn a lot. The Milk Chicken Bomb, my first novel, had a lot of very specific rules that I had to follow. If you've not read The Milk Chicken Bomb, which you should, there you go. It's a present tense, first person narrative from the point of view of a 10-year-old boy. So basically, like, any information that I can give the reader has to be expressed via this 10-year-old in his own thoughts, which is a really tight set of restrictions, but that made it it's one of those things where, like, the tighter the restrictions are, the easier it is to do. And for this, I said, I'm going to write something third person, past tense. I'll just learn how to do that. And what I realized was once those tight constraints came off, and it could be anything, how hard that was. And I mean, Alana, you would have seen in early drafts where the kind of tone and pace and rhythm of it would have varied wildly from section to section. And eventually we hit on this sort of like, and it was with Audrey, it was always Audrey driving, literally, where like there was this kind of like tone and cadence for Audrey. And I basically had to learn to write that at a sustained level. And that took doing. It wasn't easy, and I had to practice it and throw a lot of stuff away, and eventually we got to a full novel in that Audrey voice.
Another question from Julia Williams. Hi, Julia. This is a question about all your writing. To what degree do you consciously decide to include an eccentric old man character in a scene? And to what degree do these men just kind of start appearing in corners as you write?
I think that there's a ton of eccentric old men in the Milk Chicken Bomb and in all the things that I wrote before that Julia Williams was a fantastic friend and reader for me for. She was in that class with Craig Boyko. And I think that I made a conscious, I was like, I'm not going to put eccentric old men into this new novel. And then Glenn Arpey and Rodney Lieberman and all the rest of them showed up, probably without me even really realizing it. I was like, oh, well, there they are. So it's kind of my shtick, I guess, but it's fun.
Well, they're always really interesting eccentric old men. So
as long as they're interesting, that's good.
Do you think you'll always write from an Alberta perspective? And have you intentionally done so in both your books? Do you just naturally picture your stories taking place there?
I think that I think that I will always write in places that I can kind of, where I feel, where I've spent time, and feel strongly connected to, through experience like that. So I part of that is, I mean, I'm so lucky to have had Aretha Van Herk as my teacher and mentor. And she really stresses the importance of place. And it's not that it needs to be the place where you live, but one of the lessons that she hammers home on to you is place is so important to what you write that you'd better be damn confident in your ability to express it. And so for me, just, Alberta, Calgary, small town Alberta, the places the band toured. The new thing that I'm working on is kind of largely set in East Kootenay in Eastern BC, sort of in the Columbia Valley area where I've spent a lot of time as well. And that's just, yes, I'm still really fascinated by all of that. And I feel like there's a lot still for me to, at least, to explore in those places. So yeah.
Yeah, and the place is so alive, in both your novels, that you really feel like you're there. I mean, you are technically there, but I'm not there, and I feel like I am. So it's a real strength, I think, of the novels.
Thank you.
Christina is asking, what are you currently reading, and who are some of your favorite authors?
What am I currently reading? I have been rereading some things lately. I've been rereading a lot of the Ursula K. Le Guin, the Earthsea novels, which is very different from what I write. I've been reading, I haven't been reading as much fiction as I should. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, which I always enjoy. I'm reading the Václav Smil, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, Growth, which is really fascinating. And I'm reading this book about Dolly Parton called, I'm going to get the title wrong, She'd Come By It Natural, which is totally fascinating. Fiction, I mean, I have a well of fiction writers that I go back to again and again, and that's Robert Croach, who is all of our godfather as Alberta writers. I reread The Crow Said kind of religiously every few years. Moby Dick I reread all the time. I'm going to give really kind of like standard sounding fiction answers. Alice Munro, you can never stop learning from her. You can never stop learning from Gertrude Stein. Thomas Pynchon, kind of specifically, not the, I mean, I love it, but not the excessive, but the Crying Out Loud 49 teaches you so much about like how to do a lot in a little, whereas his other novels are doing a lot with a lot. There's probably lots more, but those are the things that I go back to again and again. I'm more of an obsessive rereader than like a broad reader of new things, and whatever effect that's had on me.
One more question. What favorite records would you and Audrey share in common?
Oh, we made a bunch of playlists that James at Coach House has been sharing out. I mean, Audrey, obviously those surf records that she loves, Link Ray and Dick Dale, but also Audrey's like, she's old enough and she would have listened to the Huevos Rancheros records. I feel like Audrey Cole would have been a Curse of Horseflesh fan, and some other great Calgary bands.
I think we can maybe put the playlists in the chat. Maybe one of my Coach House coworkers can put them in there. If not, you can find them on our Instagram or our Twitter. They're really great playlists and an excellent background music when you're reading the book. So you should check it out. Sure.
Yeah, there's one for Audrey, which is, you know, kind of like original surf classics plus newer stuff like Shadowy Men and a Shadowy Planet aren't newer, but in context of. And then there's one for Rodney Leverman, which is obviously the Leverman songs in the book don't exist, so it's kind of a bunch of the kinds of songs that that are sort of Rodney's worldview. There's one for the Skinny Cowboy, which is biker drug rock, and there's one
presence through the book.
And there's one for Alex Main as well. Alex Main is the party guy that runs the Crash Palace, so that's more like dance music, and in my sort of limited experience, the dance music. So yeah, those, hopefully people enjoy those.
Well, we should probably wrap up. If there's no last minute questions. It's so great to hear you read and to hear Astral Swans, and so great to have a chance to launch this book out there into the world. I hope all of you watching, you know, grab a copy, read it, enjoy it. There's a link in the chat if you want to buy a copy from us or from your local independent bookstore. So thrilled to be here with you all, and thank you again. Congratulations, Andrew, and good night to everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.